Guys, we are into Intuitive Underground Part 2. I'm a little I'm a little past the halfway point of this 6-hour video. It is just mind-blowing. By the way, I got great news. The Intuitive Underground team actually did reach back out to me, and they might be willing to do an interview, which would be absolutely incredible. Like, the information that they've released in this massive video is insane. I'm going to make sure to post a link to their video as well in the description. I forgot to do it last time. I did post in one of the comments, but I know people were asking about it. Also, I've noticed that this video has gotten a lot of views, and I think they've gotten some more subscribers too. So I wonder if my video yesterday was a part of that. I'm not totally sure, but it needs to get more views, and they need to get more subscribers, because what they're doing is it's wild. It is truly incredible. It's just so much information in this 6-hour video. So I'm doing my best to parse through it and then showcase some of these really important bits to you guys with some timestamps and all that. By the way, I forgot to give a shout out to Krishna Consciousness Academy. This is the individual that's been on my live streams and in the channel commenting. This is the person that first put me onto this video, and this video is a treasure trove of so much information. So if you missed part 1, you can go back and watch it. But if you did watch it, we're going to get into part 2, and I got a bunch of crazy fascinating nuggets that I'm going to play for you guys. Just so much more information about the system, about who the Archons are, what's kind of the end game, what are they moving towards. And I'll be honest, some of it is scary, but I've tried to once again end on a positive note, an uplifting note that ultimately will give you, I think, some comfort and some hope, even when things seem quite dire at certain points in this video. But without further ado, let's get into it. Just a quick recap. Intuitive Underground is this team of remote viewers, and this is from their website. I'm not going to go through the bios like I did in the first video. You can check that out if you want to see more about them. But they're a semi-formal organization comprised of individuals trained in the use of advanced intuition-based data acquisition and the information analysis tools, primarily technical remote viewing. We have been working together since 2012, and our team's combined experience approaches a century. It's wild, right? Everybody all together. Our goal in launching this web platform is to demonstrate the various applications of remote viewing and similar tools, and covering difficult or impossible to obtain information regarding a variety of subject matters. So here we go. They're basically trying to figure out everything for us with all this, to ascertain all this information that would possibly otherwise be impossible to ascertain. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first clip that I came across here that I wanted to share is they are saying that there's an active effort right now to redesign the meat suits, essentially the containers that house our souls, our spirits, our essence. And they're doing a redesign. And actually, that redesign is happening right now via hybrids. And you're going to hear right now in this clip why this is happening.
Have this idea of this in the data, that this, every time that this simulation ends and is reset and recycled, that there's a new version of the meat suit that comes out. It seems as if this has been happening for quite some time. It could be millions of years by our current understanding vernacular of using that term or concept. But just as Morgan was talking about this idea of VR goggles and a prisoner serving 100 consecutive life sentences in a matter of 10 minutes, like, it's too big for my brain to kind of wrap itself around.
Okay, so we're having this potential reset that they think we're having. I think Isabella Green has talked about a potential reset of the system as well. And then they're creating these new suits. And there's various reasons that they go into later on, but it's essentially to make the system run more smoothly, make the energy extraction process easier, and then also reduce the risk of people figuring out what's going on and thereby trying to escape. And one of the things apparently they're doing in this new redesigned upload is trying to remove, I called it the enlightened ones. They didn't say that, but basically people that are catching on to what's going on and that are maybe alerting others, they're removing these folks from the simulation for the next iterations.
We have data about the events that led into this idea of the origin of Homo sapiens sapiens, or at least this particular cycle. And it speaks to the idea of a people being conquered by an outside force and being forced into this simulation, or this trap, or this gulag, so to speak. And the one point I wanted to try and get to is that it seems as if at the point of whether you want to call it graduation from the school of earth, or the point at which you've figured out what they're doing and how they're doing it for the most part and how to avoid the light, it seems as if they're searching for those particular folks, whether it's that paradigm I just spoke about or the idea of graduating earth school, where in which those individuals are being taken out of the next version of the cycle. And we're not 100% sure about what happens next, but it does appear as if they're looking for people who aren't being fooled by their technology, their I want to say mind games, but it's more of a mind field game, with ego and figuring yourself out and being able to adapt and overcome the barriers and the issues that arise with living within this particular simulation. So it seems as if those people are being taken out or being searched for, because it seems as if the people who wound up in it were selected from a different simulation as well, whether it actually happened where these people were conquered and then thrown into the simulation, or was just another simulation. We're not sure how many layers to the dream there is at this point. We're just concerned with our current situation, and it may go a lot deeper than that. We're not sure.
They don't know how deep it goes. That's wild. Imagine you could have simulations within simulations within simulations, and then trying to get out. You're getting out of one simulation, you think you're out, but you're still 10 simulations deep. I mean, I don't know if that's the case, but it is a little bit of a scary thought. But yeah, I mean, that would make sense that you'd want to start maybe removing the people that are waking everybody up. I don't know what that means or how or where they would put those folks, but interesting. And again, they say that's supported by the data, aka the experiences that they've received, that they've corroborated from these remote viewing experiences. Okay. Now we're coming to the idea of why they're doing this revamp, why they're changing the system. This is about the next iteration of the trap and how it's going to be optimized for energy extraction.
No, so I have envisioned this ultimate soul trap with the next iteration, which is the hybrids. So they're creating these hybrids. They seem to have a genetic fit for the human soul in the hybrids. The hybrids are completely under their control. They're hive-minded. They're under their control. They're psychically superior to us. The Archons are feeding off of them. That's already been seen in the abduction material. So I think that's the next iteration, and it's more perfect than we are, because as humans, whatever's been created within humans, we have something they don't have. There's some type of essence, energy, spirit, soul, whatever we want to call it, something we have that they don't have, that they're obviously feeding off of and trying to harness. I mean, the information I got was that they were going to reverse engineer us, this essence we have. And if they couldn't do that, they were either going to hijack it or just trap it. Those were the things I was getting from them. And I think that they found the perfect ultimate soul trap within these hybrids, because if they can put a human soul inside of a hybrid, the hybrid is much more under their control, much less likely to seek something outside of that system. And it's definitely a step further in perfection as far as what they're looking for, so that they can harvest whatever this is they're harvesting.
It puts a bad feeling in my stomach. I hate to say it when I'm listening to this, probably does for you too. This idea that essentially they're creating they're calling it meat suits, you call it other little biological prisons, I guess you could say, to insert us within, that are going to be less likely to wake up, more likely to go with the program. Well, this is what they've seen, and this is what they're corroborating. They each of their experiences have corroborated this vision, and now they go deeper into what their the eventual goal, where they're trying to get to. And I think the only way the way you can imagine it is They're just trying to get a more and more refined energy extraction process. So it's like you could think about it starting with a steam engine, or maybe just like straight up fire, burning wood, and then using the heat and the pressure to generate mechanical energy, then going to steam, then going to, I don't know, nuclear power or something like that, using these reactions to generate the electricity, and sort of moving along these technological evolutions. But in their case, the energy that they're trying to the energy extraction they're trying to optimize is from our consciousness, apparently. And so they're trying to get it to a point where the extraction is super, super easy. And the analogy they make, which is really scary, is they say they're trying to make us the spiritual equivalent of a sex slave, where they reduce our autonomy to essentially our free agency effectively to zero, and then we're just there to be harvested.
When your understanding of the data is that they wanted to beat evolution to the punch, when we're talking about the goal in mind, we're talking about a devolutionary optimum, not a maximum agency and a brilliant glowing intelligence and a moral development that is Christ-like. We're talking about, essentially the spiritual equivalent of a sex slave. Am I
100%? Yeah, spiritual. Yeah, essentially.
Something that can produce the Loosh equivalent of an extreme cathexis, or an extreme spiritual emotional intensity, but as essentially asymptotically zero agency.
Yeah, like the highly efficient process. Ultimately, the most efficiency that they could gain out of the situation is what they're trying to get. They're trying to get to.
And that's what they're breeding right now with the hybrids. I mean, you couldn't even make it up. That's exactly where they're.
When they say asymptotically zero free agency, that's a math term. So if you think about a asymptote for a rational function, it's basically like, let's say the asymptote rests at zero. So they're saying zero free agency. But I think it's an important point to make. Asymptotes, you never reach them. You just approach them. So when they say asymptotically zero free agency, I think the positive takeaway there is you can't 100% remove free agency or free will. This goes back to the idea of the law of free will. But you can continue to confuse the free will and sort of artificially reduce it, but you can't eliminate it. I think that's the overarching message, and that's what he's basically saying, and why he's using such a specific term. But yeah, it sounds like they're trying to limit it and approach that asymptote as close as possible to make the energy extraction as easy as they can. So now we get to this question of, why are they upgrading the system? Where are they trying to go towards? As they're trying to reduce the free agency, we get to this central idea of what the goal is in terms of this system. And it's, again, a little bit of a scary thought, but I'll let them explain it and then I'll chime in afterwards. But yeah, just hear for yourself.
Go ahead, French.
What if we, after being recycled so many times, more and more of us are catching on, and more of us are waking up, so to speak?
Yeah, the data speaks.
And so ultimately, they need a new meat suit, right? They need a meat suit that's not going to wake up, that's not going to go against the agenda, and that is very efficient at the psychic output that they need.
Yep, 100%. I would agree with that. That particular line of thought is in the data.
So there you go. Just trying to keep the process moving forward and keep making it more efficient. But there's another point in this video, or in these slides, where they talk about where they're trying to get to in terms of, okay, we're upgrading the meat suit, but where are we really going with this? They're trying to get it just to be just like a little pool of energy that they can just extract at any moment that has no resistance. That's kind of what they're trying to get to. Okay. But the question that I always have is why. We seem to have other sources of energy. We're talking about nuclear. We're talking about 0 point. Why don't these guys just use 0 point energy? Why is there this desire or need or want to extract Loosh, this emotional energy, from consciousness or our souls or whatever? And they this is the first people that I've heard really touched upon this. Like, what are the differences between this type of energy and the energy that we're familiar with? And they actually start discussing this, and they say, look, we may not really understand energy and just how powerful this type of energy in particular is or could be, or how valuable it could be comparatively to the energy resources that we are familiar with.
Isn't there also a possibility here that we just don't understand the true powerful sources of energy, and that it's not so much about outside and inside and outside, but since some major parts of theoretical, less theoretical physics have been occluded from us, if you subscribe to the advanced propulsion theories of Maxwell and Heaviside, and the string theory decoy, that maybe something more fundamental, such as our soul or our consciousness, is a more powerful energy source. And just like, we didn't know how much power existed between subatomic particles, how much energy could be released within a single atom, we could easily, considering consciousness is much harder to understand than nuclear physics, we could easily be mistaking something maybe even more powerful than vacuum energy that is a genuine physical source of power. Just as an example here, that just are ensuring or controlling our own ignorance and amnesia, makes sense for them to manipulate our souls or trap us, because these ships, when we say, oh, they're alive, if we mean that literally, it could be souls that are trapped in these ships and physically powering them, or at least be part of the physical energy propulsion. Am I making sense here?
That's and again, I think he's speculating here. He didn't say the data backs this up or we've seen this in the data. I think he's speculating, but I'm just so glad that somebody finally, because we hear Loosh, they're extracting our Loosh, but why? I've never really gotten my head around why. Why don't they go for other energy resources? Why do they need this for a particular reason? But this is one potential explanation, that it's just so vastly superior to any other form of energy that it's extremely valuable. Maybe it's 1,000 times more powerful, 1,000,000 times more powerful per unit than other types of energy, 0 point, nuclear, etc. So that it starts to make sense why this could be happening, even though it seems so perverse and horrible. It reminds me of the movie Avatar, right? Where they go and they're doing those atrocious things in the second one, where they are killing those whales for that little tiny elixir thingy. And it's like they're doing all this horrible stuff. They're causing all this damage and they're wreaking havoc on the wildlife. But it's because that one solution that they get from the whales, or whatever those whale entities are, it just can't be found anywhere else. There's nothing that can do what that compound can do. So maybe it's the same type of thing. They would be effectively, their civilization might effectively be finished if they didn't have access to this supremely powerful energy resource. But you know what's a bright side of this? If this is the case, which does make logical sense, it means that we are immensely powerful, that our consciousness must have immense power and scope. And otherwise, why else would they be harvesting our consciousness? So this could be a very uplifting and powerful message, empowering message for all of us, that if this is like the supreme cream of the crop energy resource, well, it's ours. We have it. And so maybe there's a lot that we can do with it. Okay, moving on. This is also a great point. They talk about who they are. Now, we don't get super definitive answers, but they try and explain who they are that are conducting, the people call them the Archons and this and that, but just trying to get to the identity and the objectives of these entities.
There's a hierarchical structure to them. They exist beyond, outside of this planet, this solar system. But that's about all we really know from the data about them. Yes, there are other patterns of information throughout the culture that I would agree with you on, that you've just elucidated, but the data itself does not go in that direction.
And you don't need to cover it now if you're going to go into it later, but do you have any sense or feeling or something from the data as to the moral makeup of the thing that is, I don't know, shuttling our souls back and forth from different simulations and saying like, oh, this one's evolved, it saw through the system? Like, Do you sense it's amoral? Do you sense it's evil, psychopathic, benevolent? Is this a matter of something higher that's existential? They just need to put us through this shit because they have another problem to solve. Do you have any sense as to the morality of what might be running this whole thing, or is this just a conflict and we're just in the middle?
Again, that's it's extremely difficult to say, but from my own perspective, I view these people or things as amoral at best. They maybe operate according to what they perceive as their own moral code. However, for us, in practical terms, it appears, I would say, more immoral, as in, well, to put it one way, they don't give a shit about us.
Don't give it, don't care about us. Surprise, surprise. That makes sense. I think in a later clip too, they even say that they look at us as their property. Oh yeah, here we go. They view us as their property.
Literally, they don't just view us as their property. I mean, they do, but it appears they also view the situation as, you agreed to be our property. As we said before, that we have this idea of, these corrupted contractual agreements, corrupted legalities. So, in some sense, and I think that's kind of key to it, is understanding and just rejecting that conceptually wholesale. That maybe I agreed to something, but I was tricked into it. That's in fact illegitimate. So I think from their perspective, in terms of, I don't think they care if we offer them amnesty, because it doesn't matter to them. That's how
would they have an intrinsic motivation to reveal what's been done to us when the entire apparatus depends on deception?
Only if it protects their own butts.
Yeah.
Basically, like the idea, the conception in the data is that they're paying a high price, and they're degrading in some particular way for what they're doing to us, and only if it gets to the point where it eliminates them in totality would they actually allow something to happen.
That's a really important tidbit, right? Yes, they view us as their property, but that's crazy. They say that something is happening to them by virtue of these negative actions, a moral degradation. I don't exactly know what, but they say something is happening to them negative. Reminds me of withering away, perhaps because of the negative energies that they're creating. I don't know. I'm sort of guessing here is what they mean. I'd love to know more about what this is, but they're saying they're degrading. So they're effectively saying the only way that they probably let us out or stop the simulation or stop all this is they get to a point where so much bad stuff is happening to them as a result that they say, okay, well, we have to stop this. Otherwise we will destroy ourselves. And then boom. But that's also feels like a glimmer of optimism that if indeed, as they're doing this, they're falling apart at the seams, then that seems that there has to be an endpoint to this. And you think if you do subscribe to this idea, which I fully do, that we exist eternally, effectively, while these physical lives are obviously finite, ephemeral. But if you think about it that way, however long this seems to be going on, and how unfortunate that feels while we're in this dimension and experiencing time the way that we do, the fact that at some point it feels like there is an ending point. I mean, in the grand scope of infinity, that could be like a snap of the fingers. So my point is I think there's some positivity to be gleaned from this, that at some point, while it may seem as though it's far away temporally based on our perceptions right now, the end of all of this and the liberation of all of this might seem a lot closer than we think in terms of the grand scope of existence, if that makes sense. And now here's our good positive message. You can indeed escape. This is a long clip here, so buckle up. But this falls in line with the things that Jason Georgiani has talked about. It falls in line with the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and they kind of go through this process of how indeed you can escape the simulation and the trap.
Is ultimately there is a positive side to it, and I want to point that out, that we have tasked viewers specifically against, you know, how do we get out of this? How do you escape the reincarnation trap? And it appears there is a way out, as well, actually, I think Fringe touched upon earlier, you know, the idea that, you know, you were tricked into this, and they effectively have to have your permission to maintain the system. So there are a few things that you can do. First is just becoming aware of I'm going to go so far as to say the fact that, yeah, we are trapped here. This is not base level reality. This is a false reality overlay that we are, for the most part, unknowingly trapped within. There are ways out. Again, I'll reference the idea of, you know, corrupted contractual agreements, corrupted legalities, legal proceedings. So one of the places where that data shows up specifically is when we ask the question, you know, how do you get out of this? What happens if you don't go into the light? So I think we kind of touched on it earlier, but all the data that we have about, you know, the this nexus place where you apparently find yourself after death is kind of, you can think of it as a tunnel system. It's not a singular tunnel towards this, you know, attractive, luring, you know, warmth, comfort, this light. There are, in fact, signposts or indicators along the way that are actually warning you. Now, as we said before, you know, the vast majority of people who find themselves expectedly or unexpectedly in this place or in this situation, it's really easy to understand how they would be prone to just scramble towards the first sign of comfort, that being the light, and very likely ignore any signs or indications along the way that this might not be optimal for them. However, those signs are there. So the number one thing is, at such a time as you find yourself in this place, and at this point, I'm fully convinced that every one of us will eventually. The first thing you can do is to be aware. Be extremely aware of your situation and your surroundings. Pay close attention to anything and everything. There are signs that are warning you not to go towards that light. And our data actually very, very specifically shows there are a number of other options. So far, we have quite positively identified 3 possibilities. One, I believe by far the most common, is the soul trap, the light trap, as we mentioned. There is another option here, and this is what we call the promised land. And the data basically indicates that if you choose or move towards this option, you will reincarnate, but not in here. It seems that is how you reincarnate in base reality. Now, the problem there is apparently there's a very good chance you may wind up tricked, and you might sign another one of these corrupted contracts and find yourself right back in here. Now, the third option is to effectively reject the false light, reject the reincarnation trap. And again, it seems that this takes a fairly high level of awareness and probably self-confidence, you know, at such a time as you find yourself in that kind of a position. So what the data tells us is, at such a time as you, we'll say figuratively, turn your back to the light and reject it, The viewers said that you basically find yourself in a situation, and what was the exact language they used? A settling of accounts, a balancing of the ledger. Now we take this to mean, effectively, it's like the concept of a life review. That's a fairly common idea that comes up in some of these near-death experiences, is the idea of a life review. Now, it seems that, again, when you face this life review, and if you think about it, there's realistically, there's virtually no way that you're ever going to be able to perfectly balance a ledger, a so-called karmic ledger. You know, if every single thought and action you take is either, you know, a plus or minus, you know, we're just talking in terms of maybe gamification here, just to simplify and streamline. It's virtually impossible that you're, so, you know, if you, oh, sorry, you didn't quite balance out this time, boom, you got to do it again. It seems that there is actually an option to reject that, to reject the corrupted legal.
All right, so there it is. You basically avoid the light. There's I think some other base reality that you can go to, or then I guess as you're even evading the light, they present you with this ledger option or some sort of a life review, like what you would otherwise experience if you follow the light and go into the astral. I think that's what I'm understanding. And maybe it seems to be some cumulative life review with multiple lives involved. I'm not sure exactly. I need to have these guys on to ask them more detailed questions. But then at this point, if you effectively reject that life review finding and say, oh, well, you need to go back again or do this or do that to improve, you say, no, I don't accept. That is ultimately the key to freedom. And these are sentiments that are not in isolation. We're hearing this from other folks as well. The same idea, awareness from David Icke, enhancing your mental faculties with a number of exercises while you're alive from Jason Georgiani. Now, these guys are saying effectively the same thing. The scary thing, I think, is that while people are becoming more wise as to what perhaps might be going on, the system is getting enhanced, is getting reset. They're talking about the hybrids. They're trying to make it a more of a fail-proof system, make it more difficult to figure out what's going on. But then the saving grace just seems to be coming back to this idea that if there's so much manipulation needed and so much trickery and so much deception that we're all starting to wake up to in various forms on this planet and beyond, if all of this just is needed for little old us, it sure seems like we were pretty dang powerful. It sure seems like we really, the cards are in our hands, not theirs. I mean, that's the only conclusion I can really draw at this point, that we have autonomy. We really do. Because why else? Why else all of this? So that's a big positive sign, in my opinion. That's all I got for this one, guys. This is just blowing my mind more and more. I'm going to get through the next 3 hours probably over the next few days, but holy smokes. Incredible. Make sure to check out Intuitive Underground, their YouTube channel, and you can watch this in full if you want to just dive into it, or if you want to wait for my next video where I break it down. It's up to you. But man, these guys deserve to be heard for sure. I think they are part of the, they're the good guys, and we need to listen to them, I think. So this is fascinating stuff. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'm losing my voice here. And I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.